Hey, everybody out there in podcast land, welcome to episode 49 of the Fortress of Rock. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Glad to have you aboard here Friday night, July the 22nd, 2022. Starting off with news of the world, as always. Unfortunately, going to start off with some negative news. Luckily, nothing involving COVID or death. But a big passion of mine over the last 20, 25 years has been ticket prices. By now, you know, almost a year in to the Fortress of Rock. As we talked every week, you guys know I see a ton of concerts. I know there's some out there that go see more than I do. There's some that can't, and I understand that. And that's what we're going to get into here in this discussion. Ticketmaster and Bruce Springsteen. A collaboration made in rock and roll hell. And I'm sure by now most of you who follow music news have already heard the stories about how the Bruce Springsteen initial shows for his upcoming 2023 tour, which we briefly talked about last week. Ticketmaster is using this dynamic pricing model for their official platinum seats. Basically, looking at how many people are waiting for tickets in the queue. And you know what the queue is. Anybody who's tried to get online on a Friday, usually Friday at 10 in the morning, you have to wait in the queue until some arbitrary little bot tells you that you're okay now to go in and buy tickets for a show. God forbid you're not ready. God forbid something goes wrong on your end, because they show no mercy. But now with the handful of shows that went on sale recently for Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band's upcoming 2023 World Tour, well, the U.S. part of it, the world gets to see him a little bit earlier, later on here in 2022. But the U.S. in 2023, Tampa, Hollywood, Florida, I believe Tulsa, Oklahoma. About 6 or 7 shows went on sale. People were posting how the dynamic pricing model that Ticketmaster was using was putting mid-floor seats in Tampa at $4,400. Now, we're going to take a lot of time here in the first segment to discuss this. We've got some other topics we're going to bring up, some good, some awesome, some terrible. But I want to spend a lot of time on this because this is, again, a big, big passion project for me to get ticket prices down. For all the issues I've had with a guy like Eddie Vedder in the past, I admired the fact that Pearl Jam years and years and decades ago tried to take on Ticketmaster and tried to bring them down. And our government does nothing about it. Our government is too focused on stupid, silly things, breaking the laws that they help set and supposedly enforce. I don't care if you're Republican or you're Democrat, you can't disagree with that. $4,400. The breakdown on those Tampa mid-floor Bruce Springsteen seats goes like this. $3,819 for the seat itself. $569.50 for Ticketmaster fees. You tell me if this isn't some of the most outrageous garbage you've ever heard in your life. And Ticketmaster and Live Nation, of course, because again, we fought Ticketmaster. Pearl Jam fought Ticketmaster. We all hate Ticketmaster. Yet what do? They get bigger because they get acquired by Live Nation. And they become even more of a monopoly because now Live Nation owns a bunch of venues from California to Washington, D.C., up to New York City. $569.50 in fees to buy a ticket to go see Bruce Springsteen. Think about that. And even people like you and me who are buying tickets for $70, $80, $100, we're still getting nailed with $20, $25 fees on each and every ticket that we buy. It has got to stop. The monopoly that Ticketmaster and Live Nation hold on concert goers needs to stop, and it needs to stop now. It's ridiculous. It's greed gone too far. And I don't want to hear from little Steven Van Zandt, who says, we didn't have anything to do with the ticket prices. And he's got to, of course, get graphic, but his dick. You're a liar, little Steven. You're a liar. If Bruce Springsteen wanted to make a stand against Ticketmaster and Live Nation, he damn well could. And you could too, you little weasel. I get tired of these rock and roll artists who say, well, we can't do anything about it. Yeah, you can. If you really cared that much, especially with the fact that the E Street Band, along with the boss, are rich beyond belief, you guys could have said, no, we're not going with Ticketmaster. We're not going to Live Nation venues. It would have been more difficult. It would have been harder for you, boo-hoo, but you could have made a stand. You could have made a statement. And instead, you come out and you act like, oh, here's my tough guy persona. We didn't have anything to do with the ticket prices. Not a nothing. Jackass. Arrogant, know-nothing jerk. You and Bruce Springsteen had everything to do with this. Just like Ticketmaster. I'm not absolving Ticketmaster. I'm saying all parties involved are guilty, and that includes the fans. Not the fans like you and me. Not us. But the idiot fans, the idiot rich fans in Los Angeles or New York working on Wall Street. This is why my daughter, for all the disagreements we have, the one thing I kind of am starting to agree with her on is the fact that democracy is great, but capitalism sucks. If you can have democracy without capitalism, great. Because I'm starting to wonder, this system we've got in place right now, where the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, the middle class gets squeezed, and they always have to pay. They always have to pay more when prices go up. We always have to pay more. The rich little one percenters who are able to actually pay $4,400 for a concert ticket on the floor in Tampa, they're the problem too. They're the problem too. Good for you, you've got all that money. But here's my question. Is $4,400 really going to make your life that much better by going to see Bruce Springsteen? Think about what you could have done if that ticket was only $1,000. I'm just saying $1,000, still well out of the range of me or most of the people that listen to this podcast. That other $3,400 could have gone to a local food pantry, could have gone to a local charity, an animal shelter. But the arrogant rich in this country, and I know I'm sounding like somebody I don't even know, completely opposite of what I normally think. But again, I am starting to change my tune in this one area because it's ridiculous with so few avenues to let off steam, to have a good time, to have fun. Disney prices through the roof, Universal Studios through the roof. Good luck trying to take your kids to one of those theme parks now. You might have to take out a second mortgage on your house. And now it's getting that way with concert tickets if you want to go see Bruce Springsteen. And I thought the Eagles were bad. The Eagles were the poster children for ridiculously high ticket prices up until now. Congratulations, Bruce Springsteen. You're now number one on that list. For shame on Ticketmaster and Live Nation, for shame on Bruce Springsteen, little Steven Van Zandt, and for shame on all the idiot rich people out there who would prefer to spend tens of thousands of dollars on concert tickets when if they held off, they held back and actually did some good with that money, we might be a better society for it. All right, moving on. Pantera is kind of doing what we've been hoping for with Van Halen. We're getting a tribute Pantera tour in 2023. Of course, we know two of the members of Pantera are gone. Dimebag Darrell, of course, killed in a tragic shooting. Replaced by Zakk Wylde. And then on drums, Charlie Benante of Anthrax. So, again, it's not Pantera. I guess it's a Pantera tribute tour. And this is kind of what we've been wanting from Van Halen. Of course, this week, Wolfgang Van Halen basically said, without coming out and directly saying it, that David Lee Roth is the problem with getting anything done when it comes to Van Halen. Shocking. And I'm a guy who usually sticks up for Diamond Dave. But if you don't think he's out there, he's wacky, he's probably causing a lot of the issues, well, please give me your theory, because I would love to hear it. Of course, Pantera is a little too hard for me, so this will probably be the last we talk about Pantera on the Fortress for a long, long time, but kind of thought it was cool with the hired guns they're bringing in. Makes for a pretty formidable heavy metal lineup. Going back to the negative again, and another rant from the Maestro. I told you guys a month or two ago, I was debating on whether or not to jump in the car, drive an hour and a half on Father's Day to go see Pat Benatar and Neil Giraldo. And ultimately, I decided against it. Gas prices, ticket prices, again, would have made that little afternoon jaunt probably cost close to 120, 130 bucks just for me. Figured I'd save the money. That's a month's worth of utilities for me, is how I looked at it. Well, now I'm beginning to think that I made the right decision, because Pat Benatar now sounds like she has become a snowflake. And this really disappoints me. Really disappoints me. As more and more of these 70s and 80s rock stars turn into politically correct cancel culture namby-pambies. Pat Benatar has now decided she will not play Hit Me With Your Best Shot, her biggest hit, her biggest song, will not be played anymore in concert because, of course, there is allusions to shooting a gun in the song. Fire away. Hit me with your best shot. Fire away. And of course, she's telling everybody, well, if you want to hear the song, you go home and you play it at home on your stereo or on Spotify, wherever. Again, another rock star who caves to cancel culture. We all have sympathy for the victims of shootings. But again, the mass media is making this stuff out to be a much deeper, darker problem than it really is. There are many awful, terrible issues in society that are now coming to light here over the last 10 to 20 years because of the incessant, nonstop coverage from CNN, Fox News, CNBC, MSNBC, ABC, ESPN, CBS, NBC. You pick your news outlet, and they're the problem. So now Pat Benatar will not play her greatest hit in concert anymore. And I can't believe now I voted for her for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. If I'd known this was coming, I never would have voted for her. And that's how passionate I feel about censorship, because it's not about gun violence. It's about censorship, even self-censorship. If you're an artist, if you're an actor, an actress, a musician, we've seen this recently from Elvis Costello, who won't play Oliver's Army anymore. Let us decide. Let us decide what's offensive and what's not. Stop bowing to the mass media pressure. These are some great, it's like book burning. It is like Fahrenheit 451. We are letting the government, we are letting the media take over and censor things that they should not be allowed to. And they're convincing the artists to self-censor, which might be even more pathetic and more destructive. We're going down a deep, dark hole with this stuff, kids. And I am scared to death that we might never get out of it. Censorship is not good in any way, shape, or form. Whether you agree or disagree with the viewpoints, the songs, the movies, the stories, you have the right to turn the channel, not play the music, not read the book. That's your choice. To say, we are not going to make this available to anyone because of cancel culture or political correctness is absolutely 100% wrong in every way, shape, and form. And I will never change my view on that. Never. We'll make the decision on what to watch, what to listen to, what to read. The government, the media, even the artist, once they put it out there, to pull it back out, to say, well, I regret doing this. Sorry, I don't buy that. I don't buy it at all. It disgusts me. It infuriates me. Pat Benatar has lost so much in terms of how I view her. I used to support her. I used to love her. I thought she was one of the top female rock singers of all time, and I still do, but I can't look at her the same anymore. I cannot look at her the same anymore. And I am now glad I did not go see her in concert and put money in her pocket now that I know she's big on censorship. All you Beatles fans out there have got to be ecstatic, even though, wow, Get Back. I still never got all the way through it on Disney Plus. It's too long. It's too tedious. there's only so much I can put up with when it comes to watching those four work over 3 or 4 songs over and over and over and over again to the tune of 9 hours. But I know if it was Van Halen, I would have been in for every minute, so I get it. I get it. I get it. Just not for me. But you'll be happy to know that Peter Jackson, of course, who put together Get Back, is working on another Beatles film, supposedly in conjunction with Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr, the two surviving Beatles. He says it's not a documentary, though, which I find interesting. Now, of course, directors like Peter Jackson, James Cameron, they take forever to get through a project. George Miller, sorry, I almost said Frank Miller, the awesome comic book artist responsible for Sin City and The Dark Knight. George Miller, of course, from Mad Max. It takes him like 10 years to get out a new Mad Max movie. We'll see how long this takes to get out this next Beatles film. Again, I don't know how excited or enthused I am about it. But Beatles fans out there, I'm sure you're ecstatic, you're happy. Good for you. I hope this lives up to your expectations, and I hope somehow Peter Jackson figures out a way to actually edit his work instead of just giving us 9 hours of boring studio banter, because that's really all Get Back ended up being. All right, to wrap up news of the world, couple of my favorite bands. First up, big news this week from Alter Bridge. Of course, Miles Kennedy, Mark Tremonti, and the boys. New album coming out October the 14th, Pawns and Kings. The title track is out now. Of course, we will review it next week here on The Fortress. Miles Kennedy and Mark Tremonti are like Dave Grohl. These guys work hard, work constantly. They are still old school. Work, tour, record, work, tour, record. Promote, work, tour, record. Miles Kennedy, by my count, when Pawns and Kings comes out in October, we'll have released 3 albums in 18 months. Of course, the Ides of March is fantastic. Second solo album, and 4 with Slash and the Conspirators. I love it. I love it. Reminds me of the old 80s heyday of Van Halen putting out an album every year. Poison, Motley Crue, tour, record, promote, tour, record, promote. Instead of the artists we have now who have to take off 4 or 5 years between albums. And I get the fact that the albums don't make money for the artists. But if you're creative, if you're supposedly a fountain of ingenuity, like you all claim you are, then there shouldn't be an off switch. You should be creating and writing and recording all the time if you are really and truly creative. And then finally, very vague, very vague, but Local H. Their last album, Lifers, was fantastic. Now that's a concert I regret not going to. I had a shot at seeing Local H in Soul Asylum about a year ago and had a free ticket, but I would have had to drive an hour and a half on my own. Decided against it. Wish I had not. bowed out on that. Wish I had gone ahead and done it. It was a holiday weekend, so I was worried about traffic. Crazy people out there, football weekend, all that stuff. Should have just went ahead and done it. Especially looking back at gas prices where they were a year ago, as opposed to Pat Benatar that we discussed earlier. But Local H is teasing something. They've got something coming out soon. They sent out a graphic through Bands in Town. It's on their website. Like most rock bands, they're not very good about updating their website. But they did put this video out there, this little creepy video. Kid in a mask on a bike. Coming Zoon. Zoon. I would love to see Local H back in that creative groove. If they've already got the follow-up for Lifers done, fantastic. And it gives me another shot to catch them on tour the next time around. All right, that's it for News of the World. My apologies for getting loud and boisterous about Pat Benatar and Ticketmaster and Bruce Springsteen, but that's not the end of it. That is not the end of it. We will talk more about those topics, censorship, ticket prices, the Ticketmaster Live Nation monopoly on down the road, when inevitably somebody else tries to hose us on ticket prices or somebody else censors themselves and takes one of their biggest hits, one of those beloved songs that we all rock out to, off the market or off the set list in their live shows because it's not proper and it's not right anymore. Because once again, rock stars all have master's degrees in sociology, political science. They're so much smarter than us. Didn't you realize that? They are so much smarter than us because they can sing and write songs. Note sarcasm. All right, coming up in segment 2, we've got a ton to review. New Journey album, Freedom, new songs from David Lee Roth, The Cult, Skid Row, and of course, first up in the breakdown segment will be my review of the Sonic Slam Tour. Tom Kiefer Band, LA Guns, Faster Pussycat. Stay tuned, kids. I will be right back. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Fortress of Rock podcast with me, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Of course, that was segment 1, the news of the world, our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen, where we look back at the past week in rock and roll and all the news and all the controversies that you deserve to know about. Next up is the heart of the show, the meat and potatoes, breakdown, where we are going to review all the new songs, all the new albums, all the new concert tours, the shows that I've seen personally. Stay tuned for that. Of course, we're now available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Hang out, kids. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Fortress of Rock. Taping here on July the 22nd, 2022, Friday night, episode 49. I've got to update those promos, don't I? We've got some notable additions to our podcast platforms. We are now available on Spotify, Anchor, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, Apple, Overcast, Castbox, Stitcher, and now Amazon Music and Audible. Of course, don't forget to check out our Facebook page. You can partake in the Weekend Rock Project, and you can always find links to the latest podcast episode. First up here in the breakdown segment, of course, break down our tribute to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Will be my review of the Sonic Slam Tour 2022, Tom Kiefer, LA Guns, and Faster Pussycat. 1 week ago, last Friday, the 15th of July, at Pierre's in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Pierre's is a very cool venue for a smaller show like this, standing room only, unless, again, you want to shell out big bucks and get seats in the upper balcony. My friends and I have found a nice place to nestle in to the side of the stage where we can see everything going on up close and personal. Drummer, a little bit obscured, but this is what we did with Mammoth WVH and Dirty Honey. It worked out well again for this show. Not going to go through the entire set list for every band, but of course, Faster Pussycat took the stage first. Was never a big Faster Pussycat fan, but I'll tell you this, they put on one heck of a show. Got about 50 minutes out of them, 9 songs. You'll notice a theme here. They played everything that you would expect them to play. And even the songs that maybe you weren't expecting, they played them, and they played them with a nice high level of energy that I wasn't expecting from an older hair metal band. Followed up by LA Guns. Same deal. They played for almost an hour. They got 10 songs. You got everything you would have expected from LA Guns. I think I mentioned on the podcast recently, if I didn't, I was worried about Tracy Guns. There were rumors that he was having anxiety issues and he had to play one show, I believe, out on the West Coast 2 or 3 weeks back from the bathroom because it was too hot. I guess heat is a trigger for him. No, I'm not going to go into another rant about the snowflake generation. But we were a little worried about that. Luckily, he was on stage, played phenomenal guitar, brought out the violin bow, used that on his first solo, incorporated the beginning of Hell's Bells from AC/DC into his second solo. And again, we got all the songs we would want from LA Guns, one of the more underappreciated, in my opinion, bands of the 80s and early 90s hair metal movement. Closed out with my favorite, Rip and Tear. Along the way, we got Electric Gypsy, we got Sex Action, Never Enough. Like I said, everything you would have expected from LA Guns. And then finally, the headliner, the Tom Kiefer Band. Of course, Tom Kiefer, former lead singer of Cinderella, one of the biggest 80s hair metal bands. 14 songs, and good for him that while he did play 4 songs from his 2 solo albums or his albums with the Tom Kiefer Band, that left us 10 massive Cinderella hits to enjoy. And of course, he picked pretty much the 10 best. Now, one thing I did not mention earlier that kind of downgraded the show just a little tiny bit was they were having technical difficulties going back to LA Guns set. They were having trouble with one of the microphones for the rhythm guitarist. I don't know if they ever got it fixed. He was like right in front of us, literally 15 feet in front of us. I don't know if he was actually singing into a live mic or not. That glitch, if that actually didn't get fixed, wasn't a big deal. But the one technical snafu that really screwed things up was at the beginning of Tom Kiefer's set. This was a big faux pas. Now, Tom Kiefer opened with Touching the Divine, again, one of his songs with his band. You can call it a solo song, whatever you want to. But then second song in, he decided to play Night Songs. Of course, the awesome title track from Cinderella's first album. Problem is, they did not have his guitar set up. So when he went to play the blistering solo from Night Songs, we got nothing. All we could hear was bass, drums, and rhythm guitar. No hint of what Tom Kiefer was playing on his guitar when he was ripping through the lead. He had a few choice words to say after the song, so he knew, just like us, there was a problem. They got it fixed. The rest of the show went off without a hitch. So again, you pick your Cinderella song. 99% of you would have been happy with the 10 he played. They even played one of my personal Cinderella favorites, Falling Apart at the Seams. Would have liked to have heard the More Things Change, but I'm not greedy. I am not going to complain about the Cinderella songs that Kiefer played, and this was a great rock and roll show. And I feel compelled to compare it to Sammy Hagar, George Thorogood, the more recent shows, Doobie Brothers that we've seen. Because in the end, we are getting to the point where these older artists are just going to play, for the most part, their greatest hits. Doobie Brothers went out there a little bit, played a little bit of deeper stuff, which I appreciated, talked about last week. And I had no problem with Tom Kiefer and the solo stuff that he played. This was, boy, probably, considering he had 3 bands, you got Kiefer played about hour and 15, hour and 20 minutes. So combined, you got at least 3, if not over 3 hours of solid rock and roll. Kind of hard not to give this particular show out of the 3 the highest marks. Unbelievable show. Tom Kiefer finally sounds like his voice is back, almost at full strength. COVID hosed me on one show that I was supposed to see with him, Rat. I believe Skid Row was on the bill. I think Slaughter was the 4th. Bought those tickets a week before everything started shutting down for COVID. And then, of course, 4 or 5 years ago, we were supposed to see him with Stephen Pearcy of Rat, and the concert literally got canceled about 5 hours before showtime. So it was finally good to see Tom Kiefer again. I have seen Cinderella a couple times in the past, so it wasn't like this was my last best chance to ever see him, but it had been a long time since I had seen him in concert. So very cool show. First time ever for LA Guns. First time ever for Faster Pussycat. And they were both great. So definitely check out the Sonic Slam tour if it comes near you. All right, new music. The new album from Journey, Freedom, came out a couple weeks ago. It is an interesting album, let me put it that way. In many ways, it is standard Journey. In many ways, it is the best of Journey, the worst of Journey, and then there is a run in the middle where you get some stuff that They're trying to do different things. I know Neil Sean has said they tried to record more live in the studio. So let's go through the 15 songs on Freedom track by track. First up, Together We Run. I've got a lot of these songs marked on my notes as SJ. Standard Journey. If you had a template to how to construct a Journey song, there are about 4 or 5 on this album that fit into that mold perfectly. And the first song is no exception. Together We Run. The mix, the harmonies are a little weak. It is somewhat of a catchy song. Not the best, not the worst of Journey. Then you move on to track 2, which we've talked about in the past, Don't Give Up on Us. Much better, a little bit crisper. Again, I marked this as Standard Journey because it almost sounds like a sequel or a remake or a redo of Separate Ways, Worlds Apart. Neil Sean's guitar is fantastic on this song. I've always said Neil Sean is one of the most underappreciated, underrated guitarists out there. He, along with Elliot Easton of the Cars, knew how to put a tight 20 to 30 second guitar solo into a song, make it fit, make it their own without breaking the momentum of the harmonies and the lyrics and the chorus. Then we get into the issues with the album. Song 3, Still Believe in Love, is one of those awful Journey slow songs. Journey could be the worst ever when it comes to composing slow songs. And they love their slow songs, and I blame Jonathan Cain. We'll get to more of that later. But Still Believe in Love is a very, very mediocre to poor slow song. So we've lost the standard up-tempo Journey vibe. Now we could try to get it back with You Got the Best of Me. Very good song. Again, one we've talked about in the past. I again marked this as Standard Journey, though. It sounds like cookie cutter Journey. And I don't mean that as an insult. Some bands can do that. U2 is one that can do that. You stick with what got you there. Then again, track 5. If I've never told you guys, my least favorite song of all time is You Light Up My Life by Debbie Boone. One of the first songs that I was subjected to week in and week out when I listened to Casey Kasem's American Top 40 over the weekends. And every time we'd get to the end, I knew what was coming. For, I believe, 10 weeks, she reigned at the top of the charts. But my number 2 worst song of all time is Open Arms by Journey. Just such a goopy, awful, nasty, sentimental piece of garbage. And I blame that song, along with some other missteps, with why I've never considered Journey one of the great rock bands of all time. For all the magnificent highs. Listen to Escape, the album. Again, you have to take Open Arms out of the equation altogether, because Open Arms really keeps Escape from being one of the top 10 rock albums of all time. And I'm not kidding. If you took Open Arms off of Escape, that album is unbelievable. But again, we get to track 5 here on Freedom, Live to Love Again. Oh, good Lord. Sentimental Hallmark card garbage. And of course, written by Jonathan Cain. Jonathan Cain is one of the worst songwriters in America. And Neil Schon keeps him around because Neil Schon is smart. He knows that the ballads are going to be the ones that get the airplay, that the chicks dig. But, oh, how about a good ballad? Lock Jonathan Cain in a room, make him listen to Every Rose Has Its Thorn over and over and over again for 24 hours, and maybe he'll realize you can make a great ballad without making it dull, uninteresting, and offensive to men. Then we get to track 6, and things start to pick up. The Way We Used to Be, the first single off Freedom, which was released over a year ago, believe it or not. The Way We Used to Be came out, I believe, in June of 2021. Still, to me, probably the best song on the album. Then track 7, Come Away With Me, is really good. Then they start to rock out a little bit. They start to get a little bit messy, start to pull away a little bit from the Journey template. So I'm starting to like things a little bit more now. Still trying to wash the taste of Live to Love Again out of my mouth, or out of my ears. And then, of course, they got to hit you again with another awful mid-tempo goop fest called Afterglow. Then at least we finally get a run here for the next 3 or 4 songs where we get, again, like Come Away With Me, this messy improv, like Neil Schon was saying, live feel, where they really rock out. They really do a great job of rocking out. So starting with Let It Rain, yet another song that we've talked about in the past. It's messy. I'm not sure if it's really a truly great song, but it's different and it's interesting for Journey. Same thing goes for song 10, Holding On. All Day and All Night, song 11, a little bit more rigid, a little bit more formulaic, just like Come Away With Me. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. They're both great songs, but they're a little bit tighter. You don't have the messiness that Let It Rain and Holding On seem to have. The freeform jam type vibe. Then we get to Don't Go, which is unfortunately the start of the decline of Freedom, the final decline. Don't Go is okay. It's not terrible. It's, again, standard Journey. I've got that marked again. Standard Journey. Same thing could be said for song 13, United We Stand, with a very weak chorus. I'm surprised they released this song. I believe the 5th single off Freedom. It was okay. It was tolerable. Not the best in the world. And then the last 2 songs, Life Rolls On and Beautiful As You Are, both have the same problem. The lyrics are terrible. Again, generic, Hallmark card garbage. And they both wait. They both have the same pattern where they both wait between a minute 30 and a minute 45 before they actually start to rock out a little bit more. And Beautiful As You Are, the final song, is 7+ minutes. Way too long. Way too long. And that seems to be a problem, again, throughout the album. A lot of these songs way too long. I believe Neil Schon says this is technically considered a double album. Of course, it fits on one CD. Those of us who are old school know he's probably right. It probably does not fit on one vinyl disc. back and front. A really hard album to review because there are so many good songs on Freedom, yet there are so many low points. I mean, low points. What I would recommend is you listen to it. If you agree with me, what you're going to do is you're going to lop off about 5 of these songs, make it a tight 1980s era 10-song album, and you can make a really, really good cut of Freedom. I mean, a 3.5 star type cut of Freedom. But if you keep it as it is with 15 songs, it's too hit and miss, too up and down. It's a roller coaster, great highs, awful lows. Again, self-edit, knock this thing down to 10 or 11 songs, and I think you'll be a lot happier with it. All right, 3 songs to review as we wrap up Breakdown. First up, new song from The Cult. We haven't heard from The Cult in a while. We talked about the fact that their new album is going to be coming out here in the fall. Under the Midnight Sun. Coming out October the 7th, and the first single is Give Me Mercy. I like The Cult a lot. But they're a band that when they are on, when they are rolling, they are phenomenal. But when they're off, they are kind of dull and boring. And I'm scared because this song, Give Me Mercy, leads me to believe that they might be on that downswing where they are right now, dull and boring. Give Me Mercy really doesn't have much to offer outside of a decent Billy Duffy guitar hook. I was not impressed. I look back at my catalog of the Cult albums. Didn't really like the last album they put out all that much. It's been quite a while since they put out something that I really, really liked. I will cross my fingers and hope that things get better. But for right now, I cannot recommend Give Me Mercy. Time is spent much better listening to other stuff, like the second single from Skid Row's upcoming The Gang's All Here. Yes, I know, I'm a Sebastian Bach fanatic. I love him. I wish he was back fronting this band. I've seen him in concert at his worst. I've seen him in concert at his best. I think it's just sad that Skid Row, the original lineup, could not stay together because they were fantastic. Only 3 albums, but all 3 albums are classics. Skid Row, Slave to the Grind, and Subhuman Race. Now, of course, Skid Row, I believe, is on their 3rd or 4th lead singer. Just recently brought in a new kid, announced him right before they released the first single, the title track from The Gang's All Here. Now we get the second song, Tear It Down, which is even better. And I liked The Gang's All Here. Yeah, of course, these guys are not dumb. Rachel Bolan, Snake Sabo, they're not dumb. They're going to find somebody who sounds similar to Bach, who can carry the tunes from the classic era. I like Tear It Down a lot. Really good, solid rockin' tune. Paired with the title track, I am really looking forward to hearing the entire album in a few months. I recommend Tear It Down. Finally, my man, referenced him a little bit in segment 1 as Wolfgang Van Halen. not so subtly pointed the finger at David Lee Roth, saying he's the reason why you're not getting a Van Halen tribute tour. So David Lee Roth puts out a new song. Of course, he has put out 4 or 5 new songs here over the last year and a half or so, maybe going on 2 years. And we're still waiting for a full album because a lot of these songs have been very interesting. Of course, John Five, the great guitarist, known for his work with Rob Zombie, worked with David Lee Roth on a lot of this stuff. The new song is a little bit mellow. It reminds me of Damn Good, one of the greatest David Lee Roth songs off of Skyscraper. Although it doesn't have that wistful, warm feel to it. The guitar work is similar. Very, very good acoustic guitar hook on the new song Pointing at the Moon. The lyrics, I had to listen to this song over and over and over again because I do not know who or what he is talking about when it comes to the lyrics. I'm not saying they're nonsensical. It sounds basically very pointed. It sounds like he is ripping into someone, but I have not seen or heard who. Some people, I think, mistakenly think this is another tribute to Eddie Van Halen. I don't think that's the case. That was Somewhere Over the Rainbow Bar and Grill. That was his tribute to Eddie. This is more vitriol wrapped up in a nice mellow acoustic sheen. And I can't wait to hear him talk about this song more if he does, because I really, really want to know who or what he is talking about, because he does sound at times very, very bitter about the subject of this song. That being said, it's good. It's interesting. Again, lyrics are a little confusing. Not bad, just confusing. If I had to rank the 3 songs this week, I would say best one, Meat and Potatoes Rock of Skid Row, Tear It Down. Then I go with David Lee Roth's interesting but slightly confusing Pointing at the Moon. And then finally, the Cult's underwhelming Give Me Mercy. And that wraps up segment 2. Next up, a very, very interesting segment 3. I want to go back. We will not be talking about any rock and roll anniversaries this week, but we have a ton of discussion topics when it comes to birthdays on today's date, July the 22nd. So hang out for just a minute through another promo, and I will be right back with you, kids. All right, now that we've looked at the current state of music in our breakdown segment, it is time to climb into the DeLorean and travel back in time to look back at moments in rock and roll history, birthdays, deaths, anniversaries of song and album releases. It is time for I Want to Go Back, our tribute to Eddie Money. Stay tuned. And as always, we're on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, anywhere where you listen to your favorite podcasts. Hey campers, welcome back. Segment 3 of the Fortress of Rock here, episode 49, July the 22nd, 2022. I Want to Go Back, our tribute to Eddie Money. Anniversaries of classic album releases, moments in rock history, and birthdays, but I don't really have any significant anniversaries when it comes to great moments in rock history or album release anniversaries. But I have got 6 July 22nd birthdays that will lead us through this entire segment, because some of these will get me on a tangent and get me talking about some bands that I love, some bands that I like, some bands that I respect, some bands that I don't. First up, of course, we always talk about our sources for a lot of the stories we find here for me to pontificate on every week on the Fortress of Rock, ultimateclassicrock.com, the Van Halen News Desk, and thisdayinmusic.com. Of course, valued sources that they are, keep in mind that opinions, the rants, the ravings, those are mine and mine alone. So as I mentioned, birthdays and birthdays only. We're starting off July the 22nd, 1941. George Clinton, 81 years old today. One of the masters of funk. Of course, Parliament and Funkadelic. A lot of you are probably going, why are you bringing up George Clinton on the Fortress of Rock? As I've mentioned in the past, I will always bring up influential artists. I grew up in the disco era. Started listening to music about 1975, 1976. I had K-Tel albums. Listened to, as I mentioned earlier, to American Top 40, Casey Kasem. And back then, and I still think this is a metaphor for our society now, back then, we all loved all types of music. We weren't sequestered and segregated into liking certain bands or certain types of music. And we've become, just like society, more divisive, more fractured when it comes to our music likes and dislikes. I had the 45 for One Nation Under a Groove from Parliament and Funkadelic. I loved that song. Absolutely loved it. I listened to bands like Chic. I've mentioned that before on this podcast. I liked the Gap Band, along with Foreigner, along with the Doobie Brothers, along with Van Halen when they came along in the late 80s. Saturday Night Fever, the soundtrack, played that to death on 8-track. Yes, on 8-track. So George Clinton gets props here because he was one of those R&B and funk artists that I respected and admired back in the day when we could listen to everything across the spectrum. I can't do it anymore. I just can't. Sorry. Hip hop and rap nowadays does nothing for me. I don't think it's music. You might find that insulting or offensive, but the soul, the R&B of the 60s and the 70s, even into the early 80s, was so much better. So much more accessible, tuneful, well-written than the garbage out there now. And I'm not just talking about rap and hip-hop. You can go the other way. I don't like heavy metal. I don't like the screamo stuff that we've talked about, Disturbed and Breaking Benjamin and Five Finger Death Punch. So nowadays you can call me an equal opportunity music hater. But back when I was younger, I loved everything, including George Clinton. We move up a couple years. July the 22nd, 1944. 78 years old today as we tape. Rick Davies, vocalist, keyboardist, de facto leader of Supertramp. And Supertramp's one of those bands that I was never a huge fan of. I liked the Logical song. Breakfast in America, it's hard to not acknowledge it as one of the biggest albums of the 70s, not only sales-wise, but musically. But given that, and people of my generation, my age group, know what I'm talking about here. Supertramp was so big for about 3 or 4 years. I find it hard to believe that they have never, ever, ever, if not only for the sheer influence of Breakfast in America, have never gotten a whiff of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And yes, again, going on my bully pulpit when it comes to the Rock Hall, you know how I feel about bands like the Pretenders. I think Supertramp deserved to be in the Rock Hall before the Pretenders did. And I will feel like that about any and every band you pretty much put in front of me until the day I die. I still understand how the Pretenders are in the Rock Hall of Fame. But again, Breakfast in America, and I think a lot of it's got to do with the fact the Rock Hall of Fame loves to dismiss that era of music that I was just talking about when I was discussing George Clinton. That era from like 74 to 78, 73 to 78 even. I think the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame voters look at that era as a black hole for music. The Beatles were done. Elvis was still thinking about making his comeback. It was a lot of pop. Like I said, K-Tel records, compilations, basically take a hit from this one-hit wonder, a hit from this one-hit wonder, and you put it all together, and kids like me would eat it up because we got, the best of all the hits of the day a couple times a year. And we only had to shell out $5 for it. And again, I am not a proponent in any way, shape, or form of Supertramp. I think I've got a greatest hits CD of theirs lying around somewhere because there are a couple songs of theirs that I really like. Again, the Logical song being one of them. But I also remember, again, the impact Breakfast in America had on rock radio and pop radio back in the day. And if we're going to sit there and praise, I know blasphemy coming, rock and roll blasphemy coming, but if we're going to praise Nirvana for one album and bow down and throw them in the Rock Hall of Fame as soon as we can because of Nevermind, why not Supertramp? Why not Boston? Boston's another great example. Boston might even be more relevant to the discussion than Supertramp. But again, Boston falls in that black hole where the rock voters just don't want to acknowledge any good music came out in the mid-70s. Moving up to 1947, July the 22nd, the leader, along with the late, great Glenn Frey of the Eagles, Don Henley, 75 years old today. I'm not going to bore you with more rants about the ticket prices to see the Eagles because I just did that with Bruce Springsteen. And the Eagles were the first perpetrators. The Eagles were the first ones, and I blame Don Henley because I think he was firmly 100% behind this. They were the first ones to hit $100, to my knowledge, when it came to base ticket prices in the early 90s when they got back together. And yes, that was a big event. I get it. But I think Don Henley and the Eagles set the standard for what we're dealing with now with a debacle like Bruce Springsteen in 2023. That being said, the Eagles over the last decade are finally starting to get more of the recognition they deserve. They were one of the few bands. We talked about that black hole of music in the mid-70s with Supertramp and Boston. The Eagles were one of the few bands that actually survived that and thrived. And eventually the critics had to acknowledge their place in rock history with Hotel California. Be very, very hard not to admit how fantastic that album is and how influential it was. I view the Eagles like Fleetwood Mac. Now, I like the Eagles much, much more than I do Fleetwood Mac, but they're similar in that they both came up through that same black hole era. Rumors, of course, Hotel California. And they both survived and ended up being, and I think rightfully so, easy picks for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But at the same time, look back at them. Very, very sporadic creative output. We know the Eagles broke up after the long run. And then, of course, we heard the whole hell freezes over quote. And then, of course, when they got back together, because they probably needed money, they named their comeback album Hell Freezes Over. Ha ha, very witty. Cannot deny the early years of the Eagles in the early 70s, the creative output, Desperado, One of These Nights, Lion Eyes, all the way through Hotel California. I'm not counting the long run. The long run, for the most part, is a little too poppy for me. Kind of foreshadowed what was coming from Don Henley in his solo career. But it is really hard to argue. You've got to mention the Eagles when you talk about the greatest American rock bands of all time. Of course, you kids know who I'm putting number one. Now, I think we might have talked about Brian Howe recently within the last 2 or 3 months, but if we didn't, I'm going to bring him back up real quick. Brian Howe would have had a birthday today, July the 22nd. He was born in 1953. Unfortunately, died a few years ago in 2020. Brian Howe took over as lead singer for Bad Company. And I have never been a big fan of Paul Rodgers. I think Paul Rodgers is one of the most overrated singers of all time. I kind of like original Bad Company stuff to a point, but some of their songs are just really basic, generic, and even uncomfortable. A song like Feel Like Making Love still to this day makes me cringe when I hear it. And I'm in my 50s. When I was a kid, it definitely made me uncomfortable. But even today, it's so awkward and so ridiculous to hear an adult man talking like he's a 13-year-old kid trying to get in some girl's pants. but always using his adult words. I never liked Bad Company's songwriting. I thought that was very, very generic. We talked about Journey in the last segment, same kind of feel without the great guitar work that Neil Schon contributes to Journey song structures. Bad Company to me never had any of that. So we talk about the Rock Hall of Fame, and I mentioned how Supertramp maybe deserves a little bit more recognition. Bad Company is not in. I don't have a problem with that. Again, I acknowledge their place in rock history. But creatively, ugh. I mean, Moving On, generic. Rocksteady, generic. So Brian Howe comes in, takes over lead vocals when Paul Rodgers decides he wants to move on. Ended up working with Jimmy Page and The Firm, of course, who I liked a lot more, by the way, than Bad Company. And then, of course, for a brief time, he took over as vocalist for Queen. But Brian Howe came in, and I saw Bad Company in concert once, and Brian Howe was the lead singer. It was on the Holy Water tour. And that album, even though, again, the songwriting was a little bit, by the numbers, a little bit, again, generic, it had a little more fire to it. It seemed like the rest of the band and the production got a little bit sharper, a little bit heavier. And Holy Water was a great rock album. Great rock album. And Bad Company in concert with Brian Howe was really good. I enjoyed that concert thoroughly. And if you want to look at it this way, he was one of the first quote-unquote replacement lead singers that actually panned out. Of course, we talked about Skid Row earlier. We've talked about Warrant in the past. We've talked about Great White. There are so many classic bands who've had to replace their lead singers, but it rarely ever translates into big hits or big sales. Bad Company was one of the exceptions to the rule. Moving all the way up to 1964, July the 22nd, 58 years old today, the drummer from one of my favorite bands, Living Colour, Will Calhoun. Happy birthday, Will. Great to see the original four from Living Colour back together again, touring, putting out new music. Hopefully we'll get some new stuff from Living Colour at some point in the next year. Again, I don't care about the skin color of the performer. I care about the passion. I care about the songwriting. I care about the musicianship. Living Colour, another band that I think should warrant consideration for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You put the Go-Go's in because they broke down barriers when it came to all-female rock bands. How about we put Living Colour in? Because in my estimation, they were the first serious all-black hard rock band. And they don't mess around. They will put social topics into their music. And it doesn't bother me with them because they do it with passion. They do it with fire. It's not like Rage Against the Machine. I compare Living Colour to Rage Against the Machine because I think Rage Against the Machine is a bunch of phony nonsense. Zach De La Rocha is a poser. The guys in Living Colour are not posers. They care. They don't have to resort to histrionics to get their point across, like the overwrought, overrated Rage Against the Machine. listen to Open Letter to a Landlord. You all know Cult of Personality. The Genius of Living Color. The four members of Living Color, working as a unit, can get their point across, get a political statement, social commentary across, again, without resorting to sounding like they're trying too hard to do it. In the end, they are a hard rock band. They are a tight, ferocious hard rock band that deserves to be in the Rock Hall of Fame, in the Maestro's humble opinion. Then finally, on our birthday rundown here on July the 22nd, we move up to 1967. The one guy, the one guy out of the six we've mentioned here, who's actually younger than me. Pat Benatar, the bassist for the band Extreme, is 55 years old today. Now, I won't go so far as to say Extreme should be in the Rock Hall of Fame or even considered. I'm not that ridiculous in my passion for the bands that I love. I do love Extreme, though, and I think they are fantastic. I have all their albums. I'm one of the few people out there, one of the few Van Halen fans that thinks Van Halen 3 with Extreme lead singer Gary Cherone is great. You're comparing it to Sammy Hagar and David Lee Roth. That's the problem. You got to look at it as a separate piece of work. But going back to Extreme, they have put out some really interesting hard rock over the years. Everybody knows them from the slower songs. Wholehearted, More Than Words, but you have got to listen to the entire album of Porno Graffiti. You've got to listen to the entire album of Three Sides to Every Story. You have got to listen to the entire album of Waiting for the Punchline. Nuno Bettencourt, Gary Cherone, and Pat Benatar, the entire band, phenomenal. They haven't put out new stuff in a long, long time. They're still touring. They're still slated here to do a date coming up with Aerosmith in Boston, their hometown. So they're still out there and they're still working. Gary Cherone, ironically, is actually working with Joe Perry with Steven Tyler in Rehab, a trio of dates. I think we mentioned this last week in the Northeast. The Joe Perry Project is getting back together, and Gary Cherone will be on vocals. But again, Extreme is a band that I have always loved. I wish we could have gotten more out of them in terms of new music. It's been far, far, far too long since we've heard anything new from them. So there you go, kids. 6 awesome birthdays to celebrate today, July the 22nd, in the rock and roll world. Got one final segment to come. As you know, as always, it is my look ahead to the next month or two of what's coming out, new music, what I'm going to be reviewing for you. So hang out for just a few more minutes, and then you will be able to frolic and rock out on your Friday night and your whole weekend. The Maestro will return in just a sec. Well, we hope you enjoyed our trip back in time, looking back at the anniversaries, the classic moments in rock and roll history. But of course, the DeLorean works both ways. So now we have to move forward. The last segment here, as always, on the Fortress of Rock with me, the Maestro Kevin Crane. Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. It's all about the future. What's coming out here in the next month or two? What songs? What albums? What concert tours? That's why we call it Wrap It Up. Thanks to the fabulous Thunderbirds. Thanks to you for hanging out. Here comes our final segment. All right, time to wrap things up here on the Fortress of Rock, episode 49, July the 22nd, 2022. Of course, that means next week, our 50th episode. How about that, kids? Almost a year in here on the Fortress. Next week, our review of Kansas Live. First time I have ever gotten to see Kansas. Looking forward to that. That's tomorrow night, the 23rd, in Elkhart, Indiana. Had a chance to see him a year or two ago. COVID hit. Decided to get a refund on the ticket instead of waiting through the endless procession of delays and postponements. So really looking forward to giving you my review of Kansas Live next week. New songs coming up in the next few weeks. We talked about Alter Bridge. We mentioned the new album Pawns and Kings out October the 14th. And of course, the title track is the lead single from Pawns and Kings. We will definitely 100% be breaking down Pawns and Kings, the song, next week here on the Fortress. Also today, Ozzy Osbourne just released the second track off his upcoming new album, Patient Number 9. And of course, thoughts and prayers to Ozzy as he recovers from that spinal surgery. Second track, Degradation Rules. Probably a couple weeks out from giving you a full review of that, but still that will definitely be on the agenda for the Fortress coming up. In terms of new albums, I think I just during segment 2, as I was taping, probably talking about the Sonic Slam tour, Amazon delivered Jack White's new album for me today, Entering Heaven Alive. So that will be on the slate here in the coming weeks. Next week, our album review will definitely be Devil's Train. I've talked about them, a band I got into through Spotify recommendations on that app. I loved the title track, Ashes and Bones. We will review the full album for you next week. Devil's Train, Ashes and Bones will be your featured album review next week, July the 29th, episode 50 on the Fortress of Rock. And then the week after that, pretty much have to look at the debut album from Classless Act, since I'm going to see the big stadium tour with Motley Crue and Poison and Def Leppard and Joan Jett and Classless Act. I feel like we should break down their album, especially since I want to know these songs before I see them in concert in mid-August. So there you go, kids. Wrap it up. Tribute to the fabulous Thunderbirds. That's what I've got for you this week. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. It was really fun to talk about all those awesome birthdays last segment. Great review segment in breakdown. Apologies for the negativity in segment 1. But anytime you're dealing with news, whether it's political, social, entertainment, it just seems like it's always negative, and Bruce Springsteen and Ticketmaster and Pat Benatar put me in a foul mood to start off the podcast this week, but we recovered, didn't we? We got through it, had fun in segments 2 and 3, and we will have more fun for you next week here on our 50th episode of the Fortress of Rock. So until then, have a great, safe weekend. I'll be rocking out with Kansas tomorrow in the boiling summer sun. Projected 90-degree plus heat. Yay for me. Also looking at future concerts now from Judas Priest and Stone Temple Pilots. Those could be coming up in the next few months here on the Fortress. Again, have a great, safe weekend. Hang out with your family, hang out with your friends, your kids, your loved ones. Appreciate you each and every week hanging out with me. I will talk to you next Friday.